3826 is an ordinance amending Chapter 5 of the City Code relating to animals and fowl and fixing the time when this ordinance shall become effective. Second reading.
Do we have a staff report?
Yes, Rebecca Rosslet, Public Health Director. Just a brief overview of kind of the history of how we got here, and then I'll turn it over to Kevin Myers, Animal Control Supervisor, to walk through some of the changes. And we do have a presentation as well. So council might remember that in December of 24, the Board of Health brought forward a request that they be directed to review Chapter 5, Animals and Fowl of the City Ordinances. Council approved that request, and then the board spent the majority of 2025 taking a thorough look at all of Chapter 5. Dr. Tom Rose, who's a veterinarian on our board, is also here in the audience tonight should there be any questions for him. All right, you've had to do a lot of IT help tonight. Sorry about that. So in looking at Chapter 5, the majority of these ordinances were written in about 1964 and have only been touched sporadically since that time. So the board took a very systematic approach at looking at the entirety of Chapter 5 and pulling out some of their suggested changes that they thought the community might have the most public input on or the greatest interest in, that things where the change felt a little more significant than in some other areas. A lot of the areas in the Chapter 5 were really just updating some language. So throughout Chapter 5, we reference Columbia Police canines, and we changed that to law enforcement canines because you could have a dog from the Sheriff's Department or MU or the Highway Patrol, and we just wanted that language to be more generic. But then a few things, 4 key areas really where we thought there would be more public discussion. The first one was some changes to the feral cat ordinance. The second one was changes to the dangerous and aggressive animals. And that was really looking at adding a hearing process for that determination, similar to what the county does for county dangerous and aggressive animals. The third one was looking at the limitation on the number of cats and dogs that could be kept by a household, and then also looking at some specifics related to animal tethering. So in the presentation tonight, Kevin is going to walk through. He's going to go a little deeper in those primary categories that we talked about. It's the same presentation that we presented at pre-council. He can go deeper into any of the other semantics if council wishes. So if you'd like, we'll just get started with this. I do want to mention really quickly, as far as how we promoted these discussions, everything was shared on Be Heard. We intentionally posted agendas that said we are just talking about feral cats tonight. And then at the next meeting, we are just talking about the number of dogs and cats in a household, so that we really kept it within those boundaries, so that if that was the topic that you really wanted to give your input on, you would know to arrive at that meeting. But of course, we accepted public comment at every meeting through Be Heard, and then we also gave updates through social media. So I'll let Kevin get started.
Okay. Good evening. So to start, we have 3 definitions that will need to be added just to go along with those amendments and additions. The first one being the addition of a definition for dangerous or aggressive animal advisors. So that's basically a board of people that would hear a hearing contesting the charge of dangerous and aggressive that may be declared on somebody's animal. We'll go more into that in 5-57 for dangerous aggressive animals, but this basically just defines who that board is made up of and what their purpose is, basically. The second one would be for feral cat colonies, and it's basically just describing them as 5 or more feral cats that are being just cared for at a single location. And third would be a definition of a health official. It's mentioned in the ordinances at least once, so it's just good practice to define that. So we didn't have that before. So starting out with section 5-3 for disposition of biting animals. we would make some different changes to how the quarantine would be held for when an animal bites someone. It's a 10-day quarantine, and basically, as it's listed currently, a person has to have a current rabies shot, a current city license at the time of the bite, and then their dog has to have no history of running at large for them to quarantine at home. And they have to take their dog to a vet at the end of that 10-day quarantine to have it cleared from the quarantine, basically say it doesn't have any signs or symptoms of rabies. So we're wanting to change it so that basically you do have to have that current rabies shot at the time the bite occurs, but we're giving people the option to purchase that city license within 3 days of the bite occurring. So a lot of people get hung up on that, so they end up having to pay a large sum of money to hold their dog at a vet or with us, and we just want to change that so there's more option for them to quarantine, and they're getting a license at the same time. The other thing that we added that's not actually on this slide is we would want both a veterinarian or animal control officer to be able to clear the quarantine. So it says currently that just a veterinarian can clear the quarantine. We would like to add it that an animal control officer can also clear that quarantine. That's mirroring the county. It's something we already do in the county. Animal control officers are very aware of the signs, symptoms of rabies, and it's easy for us to clear a quarantine as it is for a vet. So I will also mention before I move on, we don't have it in the slide, but under section 5-5 for redemption, we are striking out running at large for animals impounded that we would charge for. That seems like nothing, but a lot of times we do have officers go out in the middle of the night to pick up dogs that were, the owners were arrested by the police for one reason or another, and they're getting those dogs back for free currently because they weren't running at large at the time we picked them up. Now we would be able to charge them an impound fee. Specifically for that. It still has, the director has the ability to waive that fee, so if some kind of exigent circumstances, that's still in place. So, moving on to 5-6 for animal abuse. So firstly, we would add a B to that 5-6 section that defines animal neglect. So this would specifically say or be a charge for animal neglect that describes what that is. It's very similar, as you'll see, to the unlawful confinement ordinances, but this speaks to more the condition of the animal when we find it. Currently, that unlawful confinement, that section is for dogs that are, in a fenced yard, something like that, and we can see their area that they're in. In this case, if we picked up a dog that was clearly being neglected, and we had proof of that from a vet telling us that this dog didn't receive the care it needed, then we could issue a citation based on that animal neglect ordinance. Whereas we'd use that unlawful confinement specifically in those cases where we can see the habitat the dog is living in. Hope that makes sense. And then moving on to the section for tethering, which would now be moved to E. We want to add an 8th section to that says no animal may be tethered out during any inclement weather warning or advisory issued by the National Weather Service without providing adequate care as defined in subsection B, which is that animal neglect ordinance we're adding. So this is specific to dogs tied outside. This is already set up for dogs that are in a fenced yard. So if you put a dog out during this inclement weather warning or advisory, you have to have all those things that are in there for unlawful confinement at that time. Okay. Moving on, 5-11. This one we're simply taking out section B that says the city or the health department will give information to sellers of reptiles to distribute to people buying them for safety of the risks of owning those zoonotic risks. So this kind of takes the city out of the equation. If the people selling the reptiles are doing their job, they're probably giving out that information. This keeps the city from getting embroiled in any kind of legal action that may occur. And it's just hard to enforce, difficult for us to watch, and low impact on public safety. So, okay. So moving on to that dangerous or aggressive animals in 5-5.7. So we're trying to mirror the county's ordinances on this. They currently have it set up to where we would do an investigation on a dangerous or aggressive dog in the county. We would find evidence, collect evidence. We'd put together a statement, give that to the director of the health department, and then the director would designate if that dog should be deemed vicious or nuisance. This is the same thing, but in the city, so they would declare them either dangerous or aggressive. And then the owner of that animal would then have the right to request a hearing where they can contest that charge or appeal it. So this kind of lines up with the county, and it gives animal owners a due process. And this would be where that board would come in that we talked about. They would meet if they requested that hearing, and they would hear from both sides. So, and the director would take any kind of recommendations from them and then make a total determination at that point. Okay, let's move to 5-60. The limitation upon number of
Kevin,
pets.
can I ask you a quick question really quick on 5-57?
Yeah, of course.
Earlier you mentioned about kind of just putting law enforcement agency rather than the Columbia Police Department.
Yes.
On the edit we have in the second part of that, it says both. Is there any conflict there, or is that just kind of a cleanup that needs to happen? At least what's attached to the agenda.
That's a cleanup.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, just pointing that out. It looks like you corrected it in the first part of that line, but the second part of it has both names.
Yeah, that comes up a lot. I mean, that Columbia Police Department is used a whole lot in these ordinances.
So will that be, and I guess that'll be a clarification for Sheila or Nancy, if we need to like make that motion to do that cleanup, or if that's the sort of thing that we can be like, that sort of knowledge, anytime that this happens, just to replace it with law enforcement agency. It's on page 10. Where we have a strike through of the Columbia Police Department in the first sentence under 3. But then in the second part of that sentence, it says both. Just.
I'll have to wait for Nancy.
Okay, all right. We'll come back.
Just
We'll
missing
circle
a
back
strike
around.
through.
We'll circle back around.
Okay. So for section 5-60 for limitation upon number of pets kept, we are suggesting to add a permit, an annual permit for owning over the number of the limit, which is 4 adult combination dogs and cats over the age of 6 months. So once you have one more than that, you would have to purchase an annual permit. There would be conditions set upon the purchase of that permit, one of which is that they do have to have a current rabies shot, current city license, and be spayed and neutered. That goes for all the animals in the household, including the 5th one, or the ones over the limit, I should say. That permit would be annual. It would go from January 1st to December 31st. Anytime it's purchased within the middle of the year, it would go until December 31st, and it would be repurchased or re-upped at that time, as long as they've kept in compliance with everything. And we would suggest that be $50 for each animal over that limit. So, and there's a set of criteria there that we've written for getting that. It would have to be in writing to the director of the health department, who would make that consideration. Okay. And then moving on to feral cat colony caretaker permits. This is for sections 112 through 114. So we just tried to streamline this. We're keeping the same sort of process. We still want a permit to care for feral cat colonies, but this takes a lot of the barriers, mostly monetary barriers, out of it. So it used to be you'd annually have to trap each cat in your colony. You'd have to get them a current vaccination, rabies shot. You'd have to test them for feline leukemia. And then it's just a whole lot of stuff to do, a lot of things that cost money, and it's almost impossible to catch a feral cat after you've caught it the first time in a trap. Some of them may not be smart enough that they'll go in more than once, but the majority are going to avoid the trap after they've been caught once. So in this case, we're just looking for them to have 1 rabies vaccination in their lifetime, so that would be the first time you catch them, to come into compliance with the care of this colony. and then you basically, once you have that first established rabies shot, that does give guidance from the National Association for Public State Veterinarians to quarantine the cat in a certain manner instead of having to basically euthanize it and send for rabies testing if it were to bite someone, which we'd like to avoid. But yeah, those are the main things with that. And through this, we're establishing responsible community cat management with our partners. And I think that pretty much covers it.
So before we move on to questions, I just realized when Kevin was walking through this, and I apologize, we put page numbers on here so you could easily reference it, but the page numbers were for the entirety of Chapter 5. They did not align with the draft ordinance, so sorry about that. If anybody was trying to follow along, that's what happened.
Questions for staff on this? I have a clarifying, I just have a quick clarifying question. We have earlier when it talks about having a permit for number of cats over 4 that has an annual permit cost of $50 per permit. What is the fee for a feral cat colony permit? And like, do they count them? And then it's 50, how is the logistics of that?
Yeah, so it's a totally separate ordinance. There is no fee for the feral cat colony caretaker permit. There never has been, and never will be if I have anything to say about it.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify on that one. I'm trying to imagine counting this cat that won't be caught. So, all right. Questions for staff on this? Yes, Nick.
I'm just wondering about tethering, and I'm actually looking at it right now, which may have the answer. So I apologize. I haven't looked at this before. But what are the general requirements for tethering an animal? Other than it's okay to tether an animal, I assume there are other limitations on how you can do that, though.
Yeah, so you can only have them tethered out if there's a responsible person there at the home. They can only be out for 30 minutes, or I don't know what it says exactly. I think it's time to go to the bathroom. It's how we usually look at it. But we would say 20, 30 minutes without providing that food, water, and shelter. Or, well, let's just say water and shelter. Food is provided at regular intervals. We're not as worried if it's not out there with the animal if they're in good condition. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the main things. They have to have a certain type of tie-out. Can't be like a logging chain. And yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Other questions for staff? Yeah, Vera and then Belle.
Because I know that we've received some questions from the public about this, can you talk about the limitation on dogs and cats and how that applies to community members that are fostering animals that are up for adoption?
So the limit to dogs and cats has not changed, and we're not proposing a change. It's been the limit since probably 1964. So animals under 6 months of age do not fall into that maximum for animals. Animals over the age of 6 months do. There are some exceptions in here, such as if somebody is a commercial facility or if it's a facility that's attached to a veterinary clinic, if you're a breeder, those things. I think breeder's in there.
I don't think breeder's in there.
Okay, I apologize. But that's always been the rule. So this would still apply if it's an animal over the age of 6 months.
Yeah, the ordinance has specifically always said own, keep, or harbor, basically at one location. So you would be keeping or harboring if you're fostering, technically.
Yeah, Valerie.
Yeah. Did the commission have any discussion about fostering and, I don't know, potential different structures of the ordinance that would take fostering into account when it comes to the fee?
I don't remember that being part of the discussion. I don't know if Dr. Rose has a different memory. Yeah, because again, that's always been in there, and we weren't making any recommended changes to the maximum number of dogs and cats that a household can have.
So have we always, I understand that it's always been in there.
Sure.
Have we collected the fee for people who are fostering, or is it based on complaint?
There's never been a fee before. Right. So the other distinction is, these are complaint driven. I mean, animal control responds to complaints from residents and community members. They're not staffed to drive around and look for issues that may be happening. So oftentimes, Kevin's only going to encounter that when, and this could be a dog that they own personally, or they could be fostering, when there's excessive barking, or there's issues with the neighbor, or the animals are running at large. So we're not even going to be made aware of a fostering situation unless there's been some type of a citizen complaint, in most cases.
I can say that we already benefited from a work session on this. And when you came to us the first time, I thought these were fabulous amendments. But I don't have all the lived experiences of a foster host. And I'm wondering if maybe we do need a carve-out for fostering. And I understand that it's complaint-based and it's unlikely to come up, but I hate to have a situation where we're basically advising people to not follow this unless someone complains. I don't think that's how we want to build this. If we want fosters to be able to operate well, maybe that's something we need to reinvestigate.
Are there questions for, I think I have a question, and you can remind a little bit of the history why the Board of Health looked at this was to see about if there were, what options we had to allow people to go over the limit of the 4. Is that was really our basic impetus from that, correct? Like to give a pathway to compliance for those who have more than 4?
Yes, because there are some occasions where Kevin and his team will encounter a pet owner that has 5 dogs or 3 cats and 2 dogs, whatever the makeup is. And oftentimes what they hear is, well, that was my dad's dog and he's gone to a nursing home, or that was my son's and his landlord said he couldn't have it. So it's not even always that they sought out to have 6 animals. It just by happenstance they end up with more than 4. And currently the way it's written, there is not an exception. There is not an exception process, and this is allowing individuals under those nuance occasions to be able to come into compliance. They can demonstrate that they've met the requirements within the ordinance and purchase the pet permit, and now they're in compliance. But this is going to always be kind of an unusual situation. It's typically, when you live in a city and a neighborhood, neighbors have feelings about, how many animals you own. So that's really, that was very much the impetus of it. In the ordinances, it allows the public health director to make exceptions for things like goats, but it didn't allow for exceptions to dogs. So that was pretty unusual.
Jackie?
I apologize if this is in here and I didn't find it. Kind of building off the discussion regarding the foster animals. So the permit, is there like a minimum amount of time that the animal has to be in the home before the owner has to request or seek out a permit for those additional animals?
That was not part of our discussion.
Okay. So, because fostering, hopefully the point is that they're only in those foster homes for a short amount of time. So if, I don't know that we need that date in there, but that might be, I guess, part of the exception process. That if they're only there temporarily versus full-time. Anyway, okay.
Valerie, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, Jackie did go down exactly the same line that I was thinking. What I wondered was if we have any information or data from agencies that work with fosters as to how long a typical foster stay is, that could help us predict what would be needed to accommodate fosters.
That would definitely be a question for the Central Missouri Humane Society.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have that right now.
No.
I do
but
not
we
have
could
that,
do that
no.
later.
No,
I
again,
have
this was
seen-
not part of the discussion with the Board of Health.
I do know several dogs that have been fosters for life, but
Yes.
they're rare occasions and they're unfortunate occasions, but maybe that's good too, because they found a
Foster
home.
failures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. I think one kind of question then that I have in relation to this, like this is the first time for adding this. I think this is the first time you're making significant changes to Chapter 5. Is it staff's intent to kind of come back with like an update either to the Board of Health or also to the council, just kind of like how, implementation in case review it in like 6 months or a year to see whether or not there are any changes, especially in relation to the questions around fostering? Is that a thought that staff has discussed?
It has not been a thought we've discussed, but if that's council's direction, the board will happily take that on.
Okay. All right. Well, I will go ahead and come to public comment since a member of the Board of Health just stood up. I want them people to come to a microphone. So I'll go ahead and open up public comment for B3826. If anybody from the public would wish to speak, please come forward to the microphone. You might need to adjust it because Matt was very tall. Yeah.
My name is Kim, and I live in Ward 1. Hi, Valerie. So, obviously, I support the idea of amending the current limit of 4 pets per household in 5-60 by allowing a variance for responsible and qualified pet owners. Not every household with more than 4 animals is a problem. In many cases, those additional pets are well cared for, healthy, and living in stable homes with responsible owners who provide proper care. Sanitation and supervision and a variance would allow the city to evaluate situations individually, ensuring that animals are properly cared for while still addressing legitimate concerns such as neglect, noise, or insanitary conditions. A variance option is also especially important for residents who help with animal rescue and fostering. Many compassionate people in our community temporarily take in animals from shelters or rescue groups to provide safe homes until those animals can be adopted, including myself. These efforts directly help reduce overcrowding in shelters and save the city resources while improving animal welfare. A flexible variance supports these community members while still maintaining oversight. However, I would respectfully oppose the proposition of a charge of a $50 sanction for each animal after the first 4, which will only punish honest, responsible pet owners like myself. While it may seem like a simple way to regulate pet ownership, this type of sanction can unintentionally discourage responsible people from properly registering their animals or from helping rescue animals in need. It will also create an unnecessary financial burden for responsible pet owners who are already paying for food, veterinary care, vaccinations, and spay and neuter services like myself. Responsible ownership should be measured by the quality of care provided, not simply by the number of animals in the home or the ability to pay additional fees. A variance that evaluates cleanliness, proper care, and responsible ownership would be a far more effective way to ensure animal welfare and neighborhood quality of life. In my case, this sanction would total almost $1,000 per year on top of the annual licensing fee, rabies shots, and my daily care. The sanction would take a huge chunk of money I need for continuing caring for my cats. This money is taken from my vet bills, food bills, litter bills. I came to this city and asked for help because I wanted to make a positive difference. It feels like the city is now trying to use my love for my cats as a way to make a buck and financially extort me. Licensing offers a service and it only costs $5 to $10. What service is being offered for the $50? Because it doesn't make any sense to charge 10 and 5 times more for something that does not even offer a service. No one is going to volunteer to pay $50 extra per animal. So again, it will only affect and punish honest, responsible pet owners like myself. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on Bill 3826?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Kim. Most of the proposals in this package of ordinances are very good and very positive. I especially
Dan, will you say your name for the record?
I beg your pardon. I'm Dan Viets, 15 North 10th Street. I especially appreciate the proposals that will make it easier to participate in feral cat colony caretaking. The lowering of barriers for participation make perfect sense. There are compromises, of course, involved. There's a balancing test of concerns. But I think overall this is a very good idea. except for the $50 a cat business. That is just impractical. I will tell you, I'm representing Kim in regard to an ordinance violation case. I'm not charging her a penny to do that, and nobody's paying me to speak here this evening. But I do feel very strongly that people like Kim Olson are doing a tremendous service to our community. We should pay her for what she's doing. We should not charge her money. We should appreciate the fact that someone like Kim Olson is willing to provide care for the cats in our community who don't have homes, at least temporarily. But it's just not feasible. It's just not practical for someone like Kim to pay $50 for every cat and kitten who comes through her home. I've been to her home. I will tell you, it is incredibly clean and well ordered. Her house is a model of caretaking. She has an incubator for the kittens that she takes in and places in other homes when they're old enough and healthy enough to do that. But again, she's doing an incredible service for our community. We should do everything we can to encourage that conduct and not to discourage it. One point that came to mind from the comments made by others earlier is that the enforcement is complaint-driven from people who are residents and community members. If that were the only people whose complaints were acknowledged, that would make sense. But I'll tell you, there are people from Pennsylvania who, for pure spite and orneriness, have made complaints about Kim, and they've never been anywhere near her home. So I suggest we narrow the complaint basis to those who really are residents and or community members, similar to what we did with the Citizens Police Review Board several years ago when we had people from outside the state making complaints about police misconduct. But I just want to say again that I appreciate the great amount of work and thought that's gone into drafting this, and the only thing that I think is really problematic is the idea of charging $50 per cat.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else from the public wish to speak on Bill 3826?
Eugene Elkin, Second Ward. Just wanted to put 2 cents of my opinion. The $50 is very, very, very expensive. Where is the money going? Is it going to the Central Missouri Humane Society, the city's general revenue? Please bring that up for discussion. And I learned that because the neighbor's dealing with lots of cats, she will be paying $20 for an abortion. I don't know much about that side of the story, but a stray cat is the reason I'm injured today. Thank you.
Would anyone else from the public wish to speak on Bill 3826?
Hi, my name's Christina, and I'm requesting 5 minutes as I'm speaking for Columbia Second Chance.
Okay.
Over the past 5 years, I've helped TNR more than 700 cats and kittens and brought more than 300 into rescue and fostered. Approximately 80% of the caretakers I assist are renters. I'm currently managing and have fixed 17 cats in my immediate area and fixed more than 60 within 2 blocks, almost all under the same landowner, spread between various caretakers. As a renter, I cannot obtain a permit because my landlord will not sign, even though he has no issue with the feeding or the TNR work being done. I'm here to propose a change to Chapter 5, Article 6. I'm requesting that the current permit requirement for community cat caretakers be removed and replaced with general TNR ordinances that are enforceable, practical, and data-driven. Research shows that between 7 and 26% of residents feed stray or community cats. Based on Columbia's population, that equates somewhere between 9,000 and 34,000 people, yet only one permit is in place. This demonstrates that the permit system is not functioning as intended. Even with proposed revisions that remove testing, chipping, and annual revaccination, the core issue remains. The permit structure is difficult to enforce and creates barriers that discourages compliance. I would also like to address the feeding restrictions within the current ordinance. Feeding bans have consistently proven ineffective in other cities. When food is removed, the cats do not disappear. Many community cats in urban areas have been raised with consistent caretakers. They are not fully self-sustaining hunters. In densely populated city environments, natural prey is limited. When feeding is suddenly stopped, these cats do not relocate far distances. They either suffer through gradual decline, compete more aggressively for scarce resources, or move to the next property in search of another person willing to feed them where someone won't complain. The city does not reduce this cycle does not reduce the population. It simply shifts the feeding location and often increases complaints. In addition, if food from caretakers is removed, cats who are able to hunt will end up hunting more wildlife and are forced to and able to survive. A managed feeding and TNR approach keeps cats healthier, stabilizes populations, and reduces pressure on local wildlife. During one of my educational seminars, I spoke with representatives from Best Friends Animal Society. They explained that feeding bans and permit systems are often unenforceable. Also, many individuals get around the permit by claiming ownership of only 1 or 2 cats while stating the others simply steal from the bowl. This leaves animal control responding to complaints without meaningful tools for resolution. Instead of a permit, I'm proposing a clear enforceable TNR ordinance. This ordinance would require that any cats regularly feeding at a location within city limits be neutered, tipped, and vaccinated for rabies. If someone sets food outdoors that community cats are consuming, they would be required to bring the food inside or ensure the cats are fixed. Failure to comply could result in citations. Data collection would not rely on voluntary permits. Rescue shelters and neuter clinics already track TNR surgeries, providing far more accurate data than a permit system currently provides with our one permit holder. The current ordinance changes also requires landowner signatures and assigns liability for colony care to them when the tenant moves out. Many colonies exist in rental and lower income areas where turnover is frequent and landowners may not live locally. This creates a barrier in the very neighborhoods where TNR is most needed. When colonies are properly managed through TNR, complaints decrease, sterilized cats fight less, roam less, and stop reproducing. Numbers stabilize. However, when people avoid the permit and continue feeding without TNR, the city is left with ongoing complaints and no effective resolution. Columbia does not euthanize feral community cats. Without enforceable TNR, the only outcome is stagnation. Additionally, approximately 80% of kittens born outdoors do not survive. This makes TNR easier and enforceable, prevents suffering, and reduces intake pressure on rescues and shelters. I'm asking the council to consider replacing the permit requirement with a clear enforceable TNR ordinance that prioritizes sterilization, accountability, and practical enforcement. I also ask that wording is added to protect rescues, shelters, and trappers. This approach protects the city, supports animal control, supports the rescues and volunteers who are already doing the work. And then I have a handout that shows examples of an ordinance that would cover all of the above. And then a picture of the data that I keep for all the TNRs that I do under Second Chance. So if you want a handout.
You can give those to Sheila over here.
And then that's all that I had, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Would anyone else from the public wish to speak on proposed changes to Chapter 5?
My name is Janine Johnston. My address is 1408 St. Andrew, Ward 4. First, I'd like to say thank you because I do know that the Department of Health has done a lot of work with this. I know Kevin has been very willing to listen to those of us who are very passionate about TNR, which is trap, neuter, return.
Thank you.
That's trap, neuter, return. That is the most important thing. We trap them, we spay and neuter them, we do the vaccinations, we return them. As long as we are returning them to their location, typically those animals are healthy. Most animals have been in that community or that area for a significant period of time. And so the people who are taking care of them are doing this out of the goodness of their heart, because it's what we're passionate about, but it's also coming out of their own pocket. We are the ones who are out there, or with the help of rescues and TNR groups, trapping these cats. We are feeding them on a regular basis. We are not asking for any community support, but we are doing that. If an animal is injured, it is also that TNR caretaker's responsibility to go make sure that that animal is receiving care. So that has been very important. The permit is very hard to enforce for TNR. One of the things that we have had people say to us is that they do not want to do the permit because then they're afraid that their name, and Kevin, you guys might be able to clarify this, Rebecca, that their name and home address or the address of where the cats are is going to be open to public information, which then puts the cats at risk because there are people who want to go and poison the cats or take care of the cats, or that person may be getting comments or threats themselves. And so that has come from other communities, and then whether that is accurate or not for our community, there are people who have not done the permits specifically for that reason. But I want to thank you very much for pulling the requirement of the yearly rabies and the testing, because as Kevin says, they're smart. Feral cats are savvy. They have learned how to survive. And so to think that I'm getting any of my cats back in a trap is probably not going to happen. But I do think this is an important factor. Without TNR, if you can only imagine how many cats you would have in this community. Cats can get pregnant as early as 3 to 4 months of age, and they're going to have probably 3 litters or more in that year. Okay, and then those kittens have 2 or 3 litters, and then those kittens have 2 or 3 litters. So we are really doing the work of maintaining, reducing that population with the help of the TNR groups in the community. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on Bill 3826?
My name is Pat Fowler. I live at 606 North 6th Street, and until this conversation started, I'd forgotten that I live among a cat colony on my street. But because Eli, Elizabeth, Micah, and Jesse have separate territories, and they respect each other's boundaries, we don't have a problem with them. We just know their names and we know what their territory is. But the success story I really want to talk about is a former city employee named Amanda Wilroth, who used to work for Parks and Rec, who was a foster across the street from me in a single-family house. And Amanda performed a valuable neighborhood service. If there was a lost dog, we texted Amanda, and she brought the scanner out, and she found out whose that dog was, and she reunited them with the neighbor. There were endless numbers of litters of puppies that she brought home with her, took care of for a period of time, let us interact with when she was introducing them to their forever families, and she added to the quality of life in our neighborhood. I got to spend time with 9 beagle puppies one afternoon while my full-grown beagle watched me from the window, the glass door on my porch, and that kind of joy that a well-run foster brings to a neighborhood is immeasurable, particularly in a close-knit community. So I think there's some work to be done in encouraging and enabling and helping the fosters work well in their neighborhood. Perhaps we could have a community mediation program if there is a situation that needs attention because there are too many animals and they're too loud or they're causing any other problems. But in my experiences living downtown for 16 years and in the neighborhood I lived before then, where I lived next to yet another foster household that had a succession of puppies that we got to interact with, these are civic goods. These are things that are necessary and important for our community and things that we should encourage. Please rethink that part of whatever regulation you're going to do with regard to foster homes and foster families. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on proposed changes to Chapter 5?
Yes, Renee Carter, Award 2. The thing I wanted to bring up is I remember when the Humane Society was here and they were talking about how much money they needed to expand and to, get a new facility because their facility is falling apart. And so I have to wonder if we put a $50 charge on fosters, how many people are going to be willing to do that and what's going to happen to those animals. because a lot of times the fostering, it may be just to enrich that animal's life or they don't fit in, but a lot of times they're over their limit on pets at the Humane Society. And so I have to wonder what's going to happen to them. And I think it's a good idea to have a discussion about fostering versus, permanent pets. And also, how long is a foster? I mean, a forever foster, of course, doesn't fit in, but short-term fosters are a good idea. And then I had one other question is that, I understand vaccinations are very important, but I'm just curious as to why a rabies vaccine once is acceptable. Like, why would you even bother to have that done just once if you're going to take that off? So that would be a question I'd like you to ask. Thank you.
Would anyone else from the public wish to speak on Chapter 5, Bill 3826?
Tom Rose, speaking, I guess, on behalf of the Board of Health in our process here of discussions. Just to the last point, it's very important to at least have one rabies vaccine that does offer a decent amount of immunity versus none. As far as the number of animals are concerned, I think I spoke to this at the pre-council meeting. Of course, it depends upon whether you're talking Great Danes or cats. And trying to come up with a number that's appropriate or that fits that is difficult. So I think, the 4 number, it has been around for decades. And just trying to figure out, the leeway to allow more animals. When we first looked at this at the Board of Health, I have to tell you, we looked at it and had discussed it and given leeway to the health director to make decisions on individual cases as to extra animals in the household. We had that discussion with no fee attached to that. And then we got recommendations from the legal department that we needed to add parameters to it. So I think the board, the $50 fee was something that was proposed. I think it's up to the city council to decide how much they think might be appropriate. There are funds that are used to help. It includes the licensing fees that are utilized to help with animal control staff, which I think they're a little understaffed sometimes. So, the fees go to that. But it is difficult to determine what number is an appropriate number. If you have somebody that's fostering, we did not discuss that or consider that, but it's something to consider. You have to consider what type of animal they're fostering. Again, are you fostering 2 Great Danes when you already have 4 Great Danes? Are you fostering, 4 cats when you have, just 3? So it's hard to make limitations on that and considerations for that and how long you're going to be fostering. So, but those are things that we could reevaluate if you would like us to. The feral cat colony ordinance that we have in place, I think it was the best way to try to, I was not on the board when that first came about, but the best way to try to manage public health as far as what might be happening out there with feral cats. I don't know that we were actually approached with an actual TNR ordinance to look at, and we would have to compare the pros and cons of that to the feral cat ordinance if that was something that we wanted to reevaluate as well. So those are my comments. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me, but
they might come up after. I'll go let other people from the public wish to speak. And then,
right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Anyone from the public wish to speak to the proposed? Maybe don't go back to your back seat, just in case, Board of Health member. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on the proposed changes to Chapter 5? All right, seeing none, we'll come to council questions or council comments. I think first I might actually just direct to staff if there's any additional responses based on some of the questions that you heard, if you wanted to discuss or respond to those.
I don't know why TNR workers would want their work regulated. I think that they do a lot of good work, and there are no laws really pertaining to their work. Why should there be any that would limit their work? So that's my main thing about that. I think that the whole thing with the feral cat colonies is really a smaller scale issue than people look at it. It's people that are having issues with neighbors who are feeding large number of cats, and they're not managing those number of cats. They're not doing that TNR type stuff that is already required. So they're having issues and contacting animal control with those issues, and then we're speaking to the owner about the correct way, maybe not the best way to word it, but the best way to care for these cats, that they're getting the best for their health, and they're cutting down on issues those neighbors might be having without totally removing them from the situation altogether, because that's all we would do all day and all night. We'd be out picking up cats if there were ordinances about, cats running loose, which we just don't want.
All right, questions? Yeah, I'll go with Valerie if you're down the line. Valerie, yeah.
Okay. So, and maybe my understanding here is weak, but based on the comments that you just had, would a TNR work, would the cats that someone who's doing TNR cares for, would that fall under a feral cat colony, or is that something completely different? Would feral cat colony in any way limit TNR work?
No, to me, it's two separate things totally. TNR is just that, trap, neuter, return. So that's, you have a goal, you have a purpose at the end of that process, just to return them to the area. Now, maybe if you're continuing to care for them at that point, you might need the feral cat colony caretaker permit. But as far as the TNR work goes, there's no laws about that. People have tried to argue that putting food in a trap is feeding feral cats, and I've never seen it that way. I don't interpret it that way. So to me, it's two totally separate issues, and we shouldn't be limiting what the trap, neuter, release community is doing.
Okay.
Also, when we redeveloped these, we were trying to better match them up with how TNR works. So we removed the microchipping. We're just doing one trapping, instead of the annual trapping like we had. So we were trying to mesh it with how TNR is done anyways. So they're doing that same sort of thing.
I'd like to revisit or potentially consider waiving the $50 fee for foster situations, for temporary housing of foster animals. And I'm wondering if that's something your department would be amenable to picking back up or working with the commission on as well.
You want to comment on that one, Vera? Yeah.
Yeah, can I ask a clarifying question on that? So this $50 fee would only be for animals over the 4. So it would only be for the 5th animal, and
Correct.
then so on and so forth. And it would be about the number of animals currently in the home. So if I have 3 animals and I'm fostering one, that one gets adopted, and then I bring in another to foster.
You're still at 4.
So I've only had 4 the whole time. So it's
Right.
not that every single time I bring in an animal, I'm paying $50. It's in the moments where I have more than 4 in my home.
Correct.
Does that clarification help?
It helps a little bit, but I also, given that we have limited capacity, that we have a need to grow our animal shelters, and they work with individuals in the community to foster, I don't know why we want to charge for those who are doing the fostering. Because to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, or misunderstanding, we would pay animal control to house them. So I still, even with the $50, whether it's essentially one spot that could rotate, I still wonder if that's something that we want to have a fine for, since it's a service to the community.
So is your recommendation, I mean, your first recommendation was originally just to remove the $50 fee altogether if fostering, or is it, do you want to refer this back to staff or Board of Health to come up with, like, what would a foster situation look like?
I'd rather refer it back to staff and Board of Health, because the conversation about what a foster situation would look like and how to best work with people who are fostering. Like, it sounds like we need to get back in contact with some of the agencies that work with fosters just to get a little more information. It kind of feels like a separate topic to me.
And it sounds like from staff, from your comments and Board of Health, is they didn't come up in that conversation. So it now is obviously coming up in our conversations. Yeah, Nick.
I'm still unclear. The purpose for the $50 fee is, what's the rationale for that?
So part of it is it's additional staff time, because they are going to need to check on these animals, and there's the gathering of information on the front end. I don't have anything to tell you beyond that. It is additional resources that are required from our department.
All right, sorry, I didn't know you. Vera was not done. Vera and then Jackie.
I mean, mine is more on the council comment rather than question, which is just to say I learned about the animal limits first when I adopted from and became a foster for the Central Missouri Humane Society, where they talk about these limits. And perhaps it's because they are so closely integrated with our animal control. But I always knew that fostering with them, I would not have more than 4 animals in my home. So I suppose just a note that there are fosters in the community that are already aware of and working within the limit. And it also appears to be not the case for every organization. So there appears to need to be a larger conversation, but at least one agency is working within those limits.
Jackie.
Yes, so just wanted to provide some comments. So I am, and recently have fostered through 2 different agencies within town, and have had 2 foster failures, I think. So understand that as well. Just to provide anecdotal information on length of stay of foster animals, we fostered dogs, and we had 3 of our own at the time, and the only time we'd have more than 4 would be if we took in a mama and her new litter, but the under 6 months don't count, so that's good to know. I would say the longest we ever had a dog in our home would be like if they had a new litter, and we would have them in our home for 8 weeks, and then they usually were. I can't remember a time that I ever had any foster animal in my home that lasted longer than 8 weeks. So just my lived experience may not be everybody's. I do agree with Valerie. I would like to see additional conversation regarding foster protections. And I'm wondering for some of the more private foster parents, if there is an opportunity for, instead of them having to pay a permit fee for each additional foster animal that's in their care for whatever length of time you determine that is, right? If there's a way for them to register as a private foster caretaker instead of paying a permit for each additional animal. Just wanted to throw that out there. And going back to previous conversations that we've had specifically with the Central Missouri Humane Society, where as a city we were not able to enter into a contract that offers them more funding, I think that this could be a really nice way, again, that we can indirectly support their efforts by supporting the people in our community who are trying to provide those services that our overcrowded shelters cannot. And that should be a consideration that council is thinking about when we're making this decision.
Yeah. Additional council, Don.
Kind of thinking outside the box, I hope. The lady that spoke first with the large number of cats, is there a provision in the code for a designation, and what would it entail for a pet boarding? Be designated as like a pet boarding facility? Is there, I understand there'd be a business license, but inspections, just kind of a, I don't know, spitball thought as a way to kind of work around the, $50 in a non-foster situation. Somebody that has a large, has opted to take on a large number of cats.
Our Board of Health
I could
member
probably
has.
give you a quick answer to that as a veterinarian. This person is not, a boarding facility does not have them for an extended period of time. This person has those animals for an extended period of time.
that.
Okay.
And I understand that's the idea. That's the idea behind a boarding facility. But like I said, I'm just kind of trying to think out the box to a possible solution to a difficult situation.
So the current ordinance, the existing ordinance, does specify that it doesn't. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. It doesn't apply. Thank you. Apply to small animal hospitals, commercially owned kennels, the city pound, that kind of thing, or people that are caretakers for feral cats. So it is in there, but there's like you said, there's a whole lot to that to become a commercial kennel. I mean, you've got to get zoned, business. There's all kinds of different things that were required to get that status, and in some places you just don't apply for it. I mean, you can't be zoned business if you're in a residential area.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a few kind of follow-up questions for some of the questions that came up. One of the first ones is, can you remind us the cost of a dog license and a cat license?
So it's $5 a year for anything that is less than 1 year old, or any dog or cat that is spayed and neutered, dog, cat, or ferret, I should say, that's spayed or neutered. It's $15 for any dog, cat, or ferret over the age of 1 year that is intact. So there is a little cut in price there for being spayed or neutered.
So, and I know, Rebecca, you said part of the fee, might have come because of discussions around the demand on staff time for this. If the recommendations for this were to be more in line with the cost of the license, would that still, that kind of brings down the cost. It allows you a mechanism of which to kind of track and measure. Did that discussion come up when talking about the sort of dollar amount?
Yes, I trust you.
Board
to
of
do
Health.
it.
This is me speaking personally too, and I think maybe as the board might have thought, those recommendations kind of came to us
late.
The
dollar amount, you mean?
The dollar amount.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have a good discussion about that. And I think I commented at the pre-council meeting that this would be pretty steep and difficult for anybody to do that might have a number of animals. And so that could be something to discuss again, certainly, the fee amount. We did not have the discussion at all on the board, so yes.
Is it a question for Tom? Or
maybe?
No, then no.
Okay. So that is.
I appreciate that, Tom.
And we can. The question about the fostering, I can maybe answer that too. There again, looking at the type of animals that you're fostering and the length of time that you're fostering, and we could have that discussion again. We certainly don't want to inhibit that. We got to remember that the Board of Health and the reasons for these ordinances is for public health. And you can get into a problem sometimes when you have somebody that's a hoarder. And so we have to have some mechanisms in line to help control that. That's why we have the minimum animals, the control for that. So with leeway, always leeway, even in what we're proposing for the health director to make decisions that might be appropriate to that. So, but that's something that we didn't really discuss, but we could discuss. But we would look at all those parameters again we have a directive to look on the side of public health.
Right.
In the city limits. Okay.
Thank you, Tom. I think, so what I'm hearing is pretty consistent questions from council members on, especially this discussion about what would the process be, and I assume it'd be some process where you would look at, we would have to officially know that they were fostering with Humane Society, Second Chance, whoever it is, like what would that process be? But I'm hearing kind of pretty consistent questions from council asking to refer this back to the Board of Health for review over discussion around foster permit or what that process would be, as well as the review over the fees, maybe more in line with the licensing fees so that they kind of go together in that understanding. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from your questions? Is there anything else in directions to ask for? And I would make a proposal for this and we would be voting up or down on it, but are there any other potential directions towards if we refer this back to Board of Health? Vera.
I just really love Jackie's idea about becoming a licensed foster home rather than having like that paperwork mountain of every single animal that comes through your house over the 5. And that in that way, there could potentially still be some, like even as a foster, here is a perhaps more reasonable limit. And I know foster homes are already pretty watched over by the organizations they are fostering through, so I don't know that it would require additional regulation from us. But the idea of, like, the number that you said of it would be $1,000 a year, that would also be many, many, many times that you are having to fill out that paperwork online.
Yeah.
Well,
and then, yeah.
I want to remind us that the reason that all of these are coming to us is to reduce barriers for exactly this kind of circumstance. And so I'm grateful for that. I think the $50 fee is legitimate. And I also think that it might be in this sense that for some, it might be more legitimate than others. When we're talking about staff time, we're talking about staff time for those that are problematic. And some are and some are not, correct? And so I wonder whether it couldn't be approached from that perspective somehow. But sending it back to the Board of Health, I think is a really good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Valerie.
I want to say that I think this is both a step in the right direction. It sounds like we've had a long time since we've visited this. So I'm glad that we're revisiting this. And I know a lot of work went into it. This is the first time we visited it in a long time. And we're hearing considerable public input. And I also want to acknowledge that we do need animal control. We don't want hoarders, and we're trying to make room for situations that are not hoarders, but are also not the same thing as one additional animal over and over. So I'd like to identify those things and send it back on again.
Yeah. Don, did you have something?
No.
Okay, and so, Board of Health question coming. You want clear direction when
I
we're
want a
referring
clear
to something
direction.
to you. Yep.
There was also comments about the feral cat ordinance in TNR. Do you guys want us to look at that again?
I think it's good for review for that
Okay.
and recommendations
Okay.
if there's anything in. Yeah.
There are some. Are you wanting to take a look at this as a whole again? There were other aspects that weren't under discussion. You don't want to approve
I don't want
it
you guys to
partly.
come back. I don't want this to be another year
Right.
long before you come back
Right.
with multiple things. I think the direction we're giving here is to review an opportunity.
parts.
Yeah, opportunity
Okay.
for a foster licensed household, whatever that is, the review over the fees, and then if there are any recommendations to TNR, but I appreciate I appreciate Kevin's comment about like not creating additional bureaucracies and barriers if you're doing the right thing, but just make sure that we're not affecting them negatively from the efforts that they're doing. Jackie and then Nick.
Additionally, if you can define or think about discuss defining the length, what foster means from ownership.
Yes, and I tell you what, we do a lot of research, and I know Kevin does a lot of research on finding other entities, other municipalities that tackle these things, and so we'll look into that as well, because it may or may not be defined. Okay.
Yeah.
Just a point of order, are we able to pass most of these recommendations tonight and then just hold
Certain
off on
sections that you may not want
I guess that's a question I'll have for Nancy. And I do know for one moment, in my motion about removing the one note about the Columbia Police Department, it doesn't need to happen right now. It can come back whenever you bring back anything.
I think it would be difficult to parse out and just do bits and pieces of it, given the fact that we have something even as basic as the application fee that's still under discussion. So I'd like to find a path forward for you to be able to do that, but I don't see where adopting part.
It would be difficult because of the continuation on the same pages. So it's not like I can just pull out the nuisance.
Sections.
Unfortunately, because it is an ordinance all put together. If we want, one of the recommendations that we could make is to refer those sections that we're asking to the Board of Health. And at the same time, for some of the things related to animal abuse or neglect, tethering, some of those aspects, we can request for health. You can come back with those approved changes to Chapter 5 or recommended changes to Chapter 5 that we can adopt or vote on at an upcoming sooner meeting while we're waiting on the other aspects to go to Board of Health. Is that possible, Nancy?
And you could even do those tonight if you want to.
I think that's to Nick's question.
But it'd be difficult.
I don't know that I would have all the numbers in front of me, and since I'm the one signing my name onto it, along with Sheila, I might just recommend that for staff to come back to us with the suggested changes to Chapter 5 that are not affected by the recommendations that we had. Comment on that?
Yeah. Aren't all of the pieces that we're talking about referring back under 560 limitation on dogs and cats?
One of those, and then the other might be the feral cat colony.
So could we just accept out 560 limitation on dogs and cats and 512 feral cat colony and approve 51, 53, 56, 511, and 557?
I think
that's the question.
Right, and I think my more nervousness is that I don't want us to have missed something similar to how we lost Columbia Police Department as a scratch through. So rather than trying to wordsmith it from here, asking you to come back with a clean amendments to Chapter 5 that does not include the aspects that we're referring back to Board of Health, we can adopt those at an upcoming meeting, and then we'll wait for the Board of Health report back on those two chapters that you just mentioned, sections.
Okay, we got it.
Do I need to make a motion to this, Nancy?
So I think what we would want to do at this point would be to withdraw this ordinance and come back with two separate ordinances. One that has your non-controversial, that's not going back to the Board of Health, and then a second one that will cover the items that are going back to the Board of Health.
Okay.
Am I missing something?
I just wondered, do you have enough direction in that way, Rebecca?
I do.
All right, any questions on this? So then for this, am I making a motion to withdraw?
Correct.
Okay. I'll make, any other council comments on this? We didn't talk about chickens, so this is a record meeting. Or gerbils. All right, so I'll make a motion to withdraw Bill 3826 from discussion here and request for two separate bills to come back to us after one goes to the Board of Health. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jackie. Any discussion on that? All right. All those in favor of withdrawal from Bill 3826 say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. And we'll look to you to when that can go to Board of Health and come back to us and all of those things. So I did not put a date on it for a reason. Thank you. All right. Moving on.